Welcome to the Block and Tackle Show, hosted by Karl Block. Karl is a partner in the law firm of Loeb & Loeb here in Los Angeles, California. He will be tackling some of the biggest issues in business today. Listen, learn, and enjoy as he leaves no stone unturned during deep conversations with some of today's most amazing business leaders. Welcome to the show.
Today, I have an incredibly distinguished guest, David Bishop, who has a legion of experience in the entertainment industry and also in developing leaders in that space and other spaces. A brief introduction about Dave. He's been president of two multi-billion-dollar business units, Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, MGM Home Entertainment, and he's also run MGM International's theatrical divisions. He's been a board chair and a board director of startups and media industry groups. He is well sought after based upon his experience in governance and leadership. His strategic insight, mindset, and knowledge of how to use technology has been a game changer in the entertainment industry. And of course, he adds great value to boards. He is a recognized authority in developing leaders, and he has a passion for coaching executives. And he has developed leadership in companies like Netflix, Sony, Google, IMAX, and Amazon. Dave, welcome to the Block and Tackle Show.
Thank you for having me, Karl.
No worries. So you may know from the show, and our viewers and listeners know, that I often am interested in leadership and leadership skills. And I've had a number of people on who have discussed their experiences in leadership roles and how they develop leadership. You have one of the most interesting perspectives on leadership that I've ever seen. And obviously it's very effective. And I think our viewers and listeners are really going to enjoy talking about it today. So first, tell me more about your background in terms of getting into the entertainment business and how you sort of rose to the top.
Sure. Well, it started for me years ago, back in the late 70s, I guess. I had an itch to actually be in the music industry, or as it was called then, the record industry. And so I started it. I met with a number of people who were working for record companies, and a lot of them said, okay, if you really want to break in, you should go through retail. So I did. So I started in the back room of a record store in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia, and worked my way up to store manager, and then ended up actually working for what were independent record labels like Arista and Motown in the market. And at that same time, the home video business was starting to emerge. And the studios started to recognize that people coming from the record industry had similar skills that they needed, right? Because ultimately you're selling entertainment software into retail. So I, through one of my record connections, a friend of mine who was at Columbia Records, he went to MGM, and then when he got promoted, he brought me in to interview for a regional manager at MGM, and I, is one of those situations where it was the right place at the right time. The business exploded. I quickly moved from head of sales to vice president of sales and marketing, ultimately to become president of MGM Home Entertainment. And during the course of that, areas like consumer products and international theatrical marketing was added. So that was the first part of my journey, which was a tremendous amount of growth. Just the industry in the clunky old days of video rental, that was, it fast became a large percentage of every studio's revenue and profit. And then in the 90s, I was able to be one of the founding people, or one of the chief promoters, if you will, of the DVD format, and that caused another surge in the industry. And then through a buyout from private equity that was partnered with Sony Pictures, I ended up moving from MGM over to Sony Pictures, where I worked the last 10 years. And there again, I got to be part of an innovative process and led the charge around the Blu-ray format, moving the physical disc into high definition. And then I left in 2014. So
Okay.
that's 30 years of a career in 3.5 minutes, I guess.
No. But one of the things that strikes me is the most interesting, and what I'm about to say, it does happen sometimes,
Yeah.
but in companies of these magnitude, you don't always see somebody who basically got in at the ground level
Yeah.
and came all the way to the top to be a CEO of a big division.
Mm.
How does that sort of shape your experience about looking at companies and evaluating management situations?
Well, if I understand the question properly, um, I guess that what that experience taught me is that that every level of the organization is important, right? And the fact that I virtually served at every level made me really understand the importance throughout an organization. And every team member has to contribute and wants to contribute to an organization. So I think that shaped my leadership style, because I did lean into the fact that team members need to be highly engaged to be effective. And I found that correlated very well with financial success, because if it didn't, leaders wouldn't care about that. But it actually correlates very well. So I got to see the importance of emotional intelligence, of being able to kind of connect with every team member. And you can tell the difference, especially in Hollywood, the people who get kind of get plopped in on the top in some way, shape, or form, and don't get to have those real experiences. And oftentimes they don't necessarily connect with the rest of the organization. They can be great strategic thinkers and make big impacts, but they don't necessarily make good leaders.
And in that vein, do you think people who were in subordinate positions to you found you more relatable because you did have the knowledge and more willing to trust you?
Yeah, I think that I did create a sense of psychological safety within the organization. I learned from one of my mentors along the way that having a habit of just walking around, walking, every floor of the building, getting to know people, know what their likes are, what their family is like, really helps you, mold a team and really have them be connected to leadership. So yeah, I think I did and was approachable in that way.
I'm sure in your experience as a coach, you probably see that. And let's just talk about that. So you're an executive.
Yep.
You've done a heck of a lot, more than a lot of people have done in the entertainment industry. What was the burning desire, the motivation to transition into a coach, a founder? Like how did that happen?
Sure. Well, yeah, it was a couple of things. One, the career that I had was always, rapid growth plateau, and then as you look on the shelves here now, you don't see any DVDs or Blu-ray because people stopped buying them and stopped using them. So that was one motivating factor, is that towards the end, I found the last couple of years were more about laying people off and closing offices and looking for joint ventures with other studios. So when I started to sort of think what the next chapter would be, the one thing that I felt that was really kind of my superpower, if you will, my signature strength, was building high performing teams, right? So I started to think about, well, how can I help other leaders really lean into that, find their own way to just create fun, highly productive organizations. So that then led me, and initially I thought I could just show up and do that, but then I realized that it's a different skill set and mindset, and so I sought out additional training and schooling, if you will, and that led me to Columbia University, where I got both the experience and a graduate certification from that school, and that launched me on the path.
Okay. And when you're finding
Yeah.
people to coach or teams to coach,
Hmm.
I assume all of your experiences from developing new stuff, the cutting edge stuff,
Yeah.
having to deal with transition, having to deal with crises. I'm sure that organically that comes up in conversation with people that you're coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is a healthy background to have, because there isn't a type of experience really that I haven't been through. I've been through rapid growth. I've been through disruption. I've taken a company through a prepackaged bankruptcy. So I've experienced all the ups and downs of the business cycle, and learned from that experience, how to lead people and how to create an atmosphere of trust. But that's not in the foreground generally when I'm working with executives, right? Because I want them to find their own way. And what leadership development or executive coaching is really about is to tapping into that individual's creativity and helping them build their strategy, right? And that was a thing I had to learn early on, is coaching isn't about telling, right? It's about active listening. It's about asking powerful questions and really helping the leader find their own development path.
Sure. And let me just ask, do you think, what was it like? Because you basically, I'm sure you had people under you that you had to coach up when you were at
Yeah.
Sony and MGM.
Yeah, sure.
How did you feel going into, coursework when you already had this sort of real life experience?
Yeah.
It must have been a different perspective with people who may, have been middle managers or something who were trying to do something like that.
Yeah. You mean the experience of like just going back to school and
Yeah.
yeah. I guess I was ready for it when it happened. I tried the consulting path a bit. I joined a couple of boards, and they were satisfying experiences on one level, but not enough. So by the time I realized, okay, this is a way I can really connect with people and really be hands-on a bit in the process, then it was easy for me to make that leap and be the student and not the person in the front of the room anymore.
I understand. And I would imagine that along the way, though, the more experience you get, the more insight you have on your own, the more you can actually help coach people and grow them.
Yeah, definitely. Because now I've been at this for about 8 years, and And when I think back to the poor clients that had me in my first couple of sessions, they were more like lectures than they were coaching sessions. So I've learned that behavior style and that muscle, if you will, to really lean into the process and help them on their journey.
Okay. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about founders versus managers but also, when we talk about founders and the idea of the hero's journey, which you're very knowledgeable about. A lot of people don't necessarily viscerally think about things like this, but you're pretty thematic about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Joseph Campbell's heroes theory and how it relates to what you do.
Yep. So I can also talk a little bit about the portfolio and people that I coach and why I coach. So initially, when I started this, I thought that I would go back to the industry that I was in, and
Sure.
I would be the coach for the media industry, and that's turned out to be partially true. I have, as you mentioned in the beginning, I've coached a lot of executives from the companies you mentioned, and also other companies like Universal and Fox and Paramount and others. But I found that I really connected and felt a lot of passion for helping CEO founders. One, because they're people who are just taking fresh ideas with no capital and in some instances no people, and really building something from the ground up. And I found that very very exciting. And the more that I worked with them, actually, it was a coach of mine, as I was describing the path that these CEO journeys are on. He said to me, that really tracks like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right?
Okay.
And so, just for those who don't know, Joseph Campbell, was a professor. He studied mythology. Actually, he's at the very foundation of the Star Wars movies, because he was actually brought into the production to help frame the story, because they used ancient myths to help them build the story for Star Wars. So I guess he came into prominence, probably in the 80s, when people started to realize who he was and just what a profound professor he was. So and then when I looked at that, I said, well, that tracks really well with the CEO founder's journey, right? Because they all have this call to adventure, right? There's some moment where the CEO founder says, "Oh, I see a problem that I can solve that no one else is solving," and so they have to take a leap. Sometimes it's, I work with a CEO who was studying his PhD in Stanford, comes from a construction industry, and he came up with an AI solution for the construction industry, and all his professors were urging him to take that leap, and he was on a path where he just wanted to be a professor, and so he decided to then go out and build a team and get the fundraising to launch a company. So so after they get that calling, then they all enter this, in Joseph Campbell's words, they enter into this unknown area, right? And along the way, they pick up mentors. In this case, it might be angel investors or board members or people who can really kind of help them along their journey. And then they reach a point, they build their team, they raise some money, and they all hit a point where they enter into an abyss, right? Where something dramatic happens, right? Many in recent cases, it's been, it was COVID, or they find out that their product doesn't work, so they have to go back and reinvent their product, or they start to scale, and they find out that the things that worked for them when they were in this founder mode doesn't work when they're scaling, and they feel this tremendous amount of loss. And it sounds odd that they would, but what happens when they're in that early stage, they're at the center of everything, right? Every decision comes through them. And then suddenly, as the company gets bigger, that looks like micromanagement, and people hate that. And then they feel this sense of like, oh, well, where do I belong now? Why aren't people coming to me for decisions anymore? And so it's really a hard growth path that they enter at that stage. So keeping with that, whatever struggles they go through, the founder then starts to evolve through these changes, and then they, if things go right, they end up transformed, and they move on. And when their company gets successful, then there's some exit plan that they're able to kind of move on from that journey. Like in Reed Hastings' case, his is to build a ski resort. So they leave the day-to-day, they leave the battle and fight, and then maybe go on to do something that's more altruistic. And so that Joseph Campbell theme really carries through with the CEO and the CEO founder journey.
When you're coaching,
Mm-hmm.
I assume it gives them a sort of sense of comfort to know that there's this hero journey, a concept out there, so that it's like the multiple stages of what it takes to start a company to actually get your exit. It's not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
It's not a cold, unfamiliar, completely hazardous environment, but they take comfort from the fact that you can talk to them about this and say, hey, look, this is how it works.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't often use that framework with them, at least not out loud. There was a point where I was actually toying with the idea of doing a podcast and theming it around that, and having them tell their stories and how each phase of their journey fits into this Joseph Campbell framework. But so far I haven't done it. So Karl, you're safe now. I won't be competing. I won't be competing with you in the near future.
Okay.
But the things that I described about the pain points around scaling, those are things that I do have, a conversation with them about, and often they're in it, but when I get them, because I usually get CEO founders when they're at their Series A round,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when they go through a lot of growth and a lot of growth pains, and they'll move from 5 or 7 to 50 or 70 after they get that first major round of funding.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that in your experience, like many others, that's when things start getting real.
Mm-hmm.
You're the founder and you're the king, and
Yeah.
now you've got a whole group of people who are usually very intelligent, and they have a lot of strictures. And I'm sure you're a guy who can explain to these founders when they're going through this process, hey, look, this is the way it is now. Welcome to success. You got to the point where you got an A round, where people are investing in you and believing in you. But now that you know that, let's make sure you're on your A game.
Right. Exactly. And some of them can't make that transition.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't. And I've had that discussion. I've had one CEO who's in Silicon Valley, and as part of my process, I usually start with a 360. So building self-awareness is an important component to making any behavioral change. So with this particular CEO founder, I worked with his key executives. They gave me feedback, and it was sort of what I find often. He's very distracted in meetings. Shows up, he's looking at his phone. He's always looking over my shoulder. That type of thing. And then I worked with him for 6 months, and then I went back to that same group of people, and they said, "I don't want to talk to you." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "He hasn't changed one bit." So during the process, he was telling me how great he was doing, and everything was fine. So I then emailed him and said, "Hey, I'm going to fly up to San Francisco, where his office was, which you pick a restaurant, and I'll see you there tonight." So I did that, and then I said to him at that meeting, I said, "You have to decide if you want to be a CEO or you just want to be a founder. And it's fine if you just want to be a founder. You invented this great technology, and you can find somebody who can run it the rest of the way." And that was like a punch in the gut for him, in a way that was positive, because then he did take it seriously and did lean into the process and made the necessary changes. And now the company is thriving, and he's and people are giving him feedback about how well he's doing as a leader and how engaged they are as a senior team.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want more info on the show, please visit blockandtackleshow.com. And you can also email me at Karl@blockandtackleshow.com. Thanks for tuning in.